All right, hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm here with Coach Matt. I'm your host, Richie Leahy. Matt's my co-host. Off a little bit today because of just some changes I've been messing with, trying to get ready for more of a live format to try to do some call-ins. So we're testing that today, so if the audio is a little messed up, just bear with me as I try to figure some things out. On the other hand, Rick's out. He said he's sick or something with the allergy season, so hopefully he'll be feeling better and he'll be able to get back on next week. But I want to kick it off here with High Tempo. Matt, what do you got this week?
We've got some exciting things happening here in Pennsylvania. We kicked off our spring football season, so we're starting to get some kids back out, getting them back in spikes. Baseball season ended, so we're getting through some workouts with the kids. Today was really fun experience for a lot of our younger players. We got to go out to Bald Eagle High School. There was over 400 players from the local areas that were able to participate in a bunch of different events, and we're able to have some college scouts on hand to get some free recruiting. So it was good exposure for the kids and players in the area.
Nice, very cool. And just so the fans know, people that listen to the show, we are going to start getting ready heavily into football season. That's what we're focusing on today. Have two big topics we're going to get into later in the show, the NFL rule changes and college football's early top 25 polls that are starting to come out. But we're going to kick it off, get into the mailbag. And the only thing I got an email. And if you want to send us an email, I realize I've never really said it on the show, but our email is contact@southboundsports.com. Send us your questions or whatever if you don't have social media. I know some people have said that they listen to the show and they don't really deal with that kind of thing. So whatever, just shoot me an email with a question. The question was, do you think Mason Rudolph is going to affect Ben Roethlisberger's play? And to be honest, I'm kind of tired of this. No offense to people who are writing questions like this. I went on Yahoo today and I saw the very first headline was, Ben Roethlisberger reaches out to Mason Rudolph. First off, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger is. They're never going to push him out. You can't push him out because how many top quarterbacks are in the league? Maybe 5, 4, if that. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, you can never push one out. Look what happened with the Cowboys and Tony Romo. They pushed him out in favor of Dak Prescott. Hasn't really worked. 49ers, they pushed out Alex Smith, who was pretty competent. He's been competent with the Chiefs. They went with Colin Kaepernick, and now they've been rotating, and they luckily landed Garoppolo, who they're hoping can take them to that step. If you have a serviceable quarterback, you don't trade him for the future until you know what you got in real game situations. So that's my thoughts on that. Matt, you have anything you want to add? Anything different?
Well, I think looking at it differently, there are scenarios that it works, but it's knowing who that backup's going to be. When you look at what they were able to do in New England, they had, when Brady was drafted as late as he was, it was because they had Drew Bledsoe already in the wing, and they had him tagged to a high contract. So they had the luxury of being able to pick a quarterback late, and then when Bledsoe got injured, when Brady stepped in and he was able to show what he can do under game situations, now you have a very valuable commodity that you can trade away. Let's say in the early part of the preseason, if Rudolph lights it up, maybe it warrants a little bit of playing time if Ben gets banged up at some point. He would have to be looking over his shoulder that if he's playing well and they have their heir apparent, it could put Ben on the chopping block. Not that Pittsburgh's a team to do that kind of stuff, but if teams are shopping and they're willing to break the bank to try to pick up an aging veteran, that could be a scenario that could play out for Pittsburgh.
Well, I agree. Ben's not going to make it through the whole season. But having one guy that you draft in, third or fourth round? I can't remember now off the top of my head. It's not going to be a big deal. It's not like they went ahead and traded up for a first-round pick at quarterback, knowing that Ben, his time is up. They got a late-round guy that they're hoping Ben can go ahead and groom and get ready for the position. So, no, I think the media is blowing it out of proportion because it's a slow sports day. I mean, look at the big topics we're hitting on today. NFL rule changes, random things like that are in the news because it's basically the off season for all of these teams.
The two people that really need to be looking over their shoulder right now, though, is Josh Dobbs and Landry Jones. If one of those two guys, they could definitely be on the block, because there's no way that Pittsburgh's carrying 4 quarterbacks going into the regular season. Well, one of them's going to have to go, so you better be putting your A game on, because you're playing for your contract at this point.
Oh, and I think I mentioned it, but my choice would be Landry Jones. You're gone. You've had the longer chance out of the 3 to prove yourself. They're not going to cut Rudolph if they just drafted him. Dobbs, still possibly. His style's a little bit different. But so is Landry Jones. Came from a spread, hasn't really fit into the pro system that Ben runs. It's not going to matter. So, I don't know. You have anything else to add?
I think between the two, I think you just look at which one's going to hurt them more against the cap, because every year they're having to restructure contracts and bounce people. I think the one that's, if they're going to be as neck and neck as what they are, I think the bottom line is going to be which one's going to save them the most money. And off the top of my head, I don't know what the difference in contract is from Landry to Dobbs.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't know when Dobbs' rookie contract would be up. I assume Landry Jones is already up. And obviously him never starting or getting bid against probably didn't give him a high contract. So he actually might be the better deal. But I don't know. Going to use that Steelers tidbit as the part of the Pittsburgh Steelers for the Steel City update. We're going to be focusing on Steelers football, like I said, in general, more this summer because Penguins are out. I'll go ahead and touch Vegas is in. We predicted Vegas were going to have a good season early on. Early on, they were 500-1 odds. So I wish I would have put money down on that. Now that gambling's legal, I could have had a chance to do that because you have Fleury, who's won a cup, multiple cups behind goal, and you're sitting in a position where the Eastern Conference is beating themselves up. They're going into a Game 7 with Ovechkin, and I don't know if he can get it done. I don't know what's going to happen on the East, but right now Vegas is looking like they're tearing through everyone. If they win, it'll be the first time an expansion team has ever won a championship in the 4 major sports in the United States. I know MLS is that 5th league. They had an expansion team win it in 1998. The Chicago Fire won both their cup and I think they do like an interdivision cup in the United States. I think they won that as well, which the other sports don't have. So this would be the first time that an expansion team has really won it. It's the second time in hockey. The St. Louis Blues made it in, I think, the 1960s. But in that season, the league had basically doubled, and their whole entire side was expansion teams. So one expansion team had to make it no matter what, and they got destroyed in the Stanley Cup Finals. So this is going to be a big thing to watch. I think baseball, was it the shortest team to go? Was the Diamondbacks? Maybe 3 years, I'm thinking. Oh, I did see another one too, the Browns. People were saying the Browns won it their first year, but I don't count them as an expansion team because they moved from the AFL into the NFL. And if you're already playing in a professional league, you're not really an expansion team. Vegas was drafted from scratch, which is making it all the more impressive. So just a few shout-outs randomly on that. Matt, you have anything else to add about hockey?
Well, as far as Vegas is concerned, I mean, I'm almost wondering if the NHL is going to reevaluate the way that they do their expansion system, because they drafted a team ready to go right out of the gate. And with as many former Penguin players, you might as well keep them as Steel City update, because all they are is Pittsburgh West. I mean, when the thing that I think is frustrating is for how out of his mind Fleury's playing right now. He definitely has that look like he's got something to prove, because last year, you know, it was nice having, when he would get injured, to have Murray there as the backup, but they haven't needed it because Vegas has done a great job of keeping players out of the crease and keeping them away from hammering on them, so he hasn't had to take as many direct shots right to the body face as he did last year.
Well, yeah, and I think the other point, you made a great point about the expansion draft. I don't think they ever set out to only have one team in this draft. The way it's set up, no league wants to have an odd number of teams. I think backdoor, they were trying to get 2 teams in, get the league to 32. That balances everything out. They were at 30 like the NBA. You can do a lot more things pod-wise, travel-wise, if you get to 32 teams. And they have unbalanced divisions right now. They added one team to kind of balance out the West. Because when they moved, the Red Wings from the West to the East, it was stacked. It was like 16 to 14, I think. And Vegas makes it 16 to 15, so you have 15 teams out in the West. It's an easier path to get to the finals in the West. There's less teams. You have more teams make the playoffs. That's basic math. So I think
when you look at that as well, though, one of the other points to it is that who else do you add major market wise that's going to contribute? You're going to be taking a risk. I mean, with Vegas, they're hurting for teams, so it made sense to add there. But where else do you add another market? You don't throw another thing in LA where they're like trying to overload it. You know.
Well, I think their thing was they messed up whenever they moved Detroit, and I know a lot of Detroit fans, they're Eastern Standard Time or whatever. They think that they should fit better in the East Coast just due to where they play in other professional leagues. But now you're right. You're looking at a scenario where what team can you add and fit them into the Western Division? Because the teams or the cities in Canada that are bidding for that other team, because Canada teams will fill the arena. They're already looking at them, but they're so far east, it doesn't make sense to throw them in the West. You'll have like in college football SEC where you have Missouri playing in the East. That's what's going to happen in the NHL. And I don't think at this point the owners of the Red Wings, one of the most, if not the most successful franchise in the NHL ever, they're not going to be pushed around. So now they're going to say, put the expansion team. Why would we go back out west? Even though they've arguably had more success out there. And that was only a recent change too. So when they moved them to prepare for this expansion, I don't know what other Western team or city they originally had with Vegas. Whenever they made that move, I can't remember off the top of my head. But they were looking at two Western teams. One of the teams fell through. And now the backup cities are all in the eastern part of Canada. So now you're really just sitting there waiting, and I don't know what they can do. So, I don't know. Do you remember?
I don't know. I mean, maybe the plan was to try to expand into Canada and try to pick up another team to try to just keep that dynamic going. I don't know.
Because even looking at it, they could have, and I know off the top of my head, is it Vancouver? They're all the way on the west. But you could almost have an eastern pod of Canadian teams. I don't know how. I know they like to get more Canadian teams in just for the TV ratings. But you could have a pod of them almost guaranteeing that pod would make it to the Eastern Conference Finals every year. If they had stacked it right, I just don't think they thought it through the long term. And I don't know what their plan was. It's turning into a mess. So now they don't even have a team lined up. So you're going to be playing with this odd amount. Vegas, yeah, you're right. They can come in because the system was planned out so that you wouldn't have just one team come in, and that's what happened. So I think it was just a cluster, and you're looking at it, and there's nothing really they can do at this point except probably sit back and watch Vegas win the Cup, even though they are going to face two good teams in the East. So you're at least going to see a good finals. But it does suck for all the Canadian teams that have to sit there, that have been struggling for how many years now? Even Winnipeg finally puts together a solid team, has a great run, and they get shut down by Vegas. That has to sting. Has to sting.
Well, as an owner, I think that would have to piss you off, being that your team essentially had some of its better players on the chopping block and had to give them up so that this upstart. I mean, sure, you maybe as an owner you're getting that money back on the back end with the revenue and endorsement deals and everything else. But as a whole, you would hate to see a potential championship run derailed because of getting to cherry pick the best players off of every other team in the league.
Yeah, Matt, who do you think these owners are? Bob Nutting. They just care about the bottom line.
Hey, someone has to. They're not. I mean, it's not purely in it for the sport. There has to be an end to making some money here.
I think you'd have a good mix. I think there'd be a bunch of Mark Cubans who really just care about winning and putting together a winning team. And then you would have some that are more in it for the investment side. But, I mean, I would get complaints. I would think you would get complaints from both. But what do I know? Let's go ahead and switch to because I want to leave enough time for the football topics. Let's go ahead and get to the Pirates real quick. I'll apologize. I said the Pirates were dying last week because they had went through a thing. They went through a bad streak, and then as soon as this show aired, I did my research over the weekend, thinking, there's no way the Pirates are going to put together a run. They won a couple in a row, which bumped their last 10 from like 5-5 to 8-2 or something crazy. I think they won 3 in a row, and they were sitting in first place whenever the episode posted. So if you listened, I probably sound like a complete idiot. Well, right now, I waited this time. I brought it up. They're sitting in 4th in the NL Central. 4th. They were in first. They're winning, but the division isn't clear-cut. There's no head and shoulders team better than anyone else. So you're the Pirates. You're looking at it. You're 6-4 in your last 10 games now. 26 wins. The Brewers have been hot, and they're ahead. They have 29 wins. So right now, we were looking at that golden number. The Pirates are probably, they would need at least 50, 70, 75 more wins, I think, to get somewhere up in that ballpark. Actually, no, that's too much. 65 more wins, 65 would get you right around 91 wins right now. So you're looking at it. Are they capable of doing that? I don't think so. They haven't been winning on the road. They're only 500. And I don't want to be negative. I have some I don't know if I ever tweeted them out, but I do have some pictures of the games. People have not been going to the point where I've seen talking randomly, trying to go on social media to spread the word of the show. I've seen people complaining that there's no one in the stands to support this team. But at some point, you just have to be, hey, you want to go watch the Pirates? Nah, I watched them lose for so long. Why would I go? Like, at some point, it has to wear on you where you want to see a successful, or at least an organization, get some life into you. You had it about 5 years ago, and you traded it away. And then you had some fan players like McCutchen, who you could have kept and let retire as, like I joked about it last week, the greatest Pirate of our generation. But instead, you let him go, you trade him or whatever, trade a couple other guys, and now look where you're sitting. Your young depth isn't going to make a run. And, looking at it, Matt, I know your Cardinals are right in the same boat right now, too. Sitting there at 26 wins, same as the Pirates, struggling on the road. It's hard to win whenever you don't have a good mix of veteran and young talent. Young talent can get you wins at home, but it's tough to win on the road.
I think the issue for the Cards right now is they've been bitten by the injury bug. I think they had another pitcher go down this week, too, in addition to the Molina injury we talked about last week.
And brutal. Injuries seem like they're way more brutal this year than
But I almost wonder if
years.
it's because, going back to some of our previous stuff, if it's because of how cold the season started out at.
Oh, it's been awful. I've had rain. I was worried about the show today because of how much flooding we had. One of the malls down here, they actually had to get a tow truck to pull cars out of the parking deck because the water was that high they couldn't get them started and driving them out. So when you're having extreme weather, you had cold all the way through March and April, and I know down here in the South now, we're getting hammered with rain. It's just going to be tough to keep that consistent going. Hey, you're getting a lot of postponements. I think I check my fantasy team every couple of days, and I always get an alert, hey, this game's postponed, and I think there's just been a lot more of it just due to fluke weather. So you're right. If you can't play consistently, you're never going to get in that groove of, okay, my body's ready to go. You take a few days off, try to give it 100%, and you're in your 30s. Man, if I skip a workout and I try to do some weights, I'm dead. Dead tired. And I'm only, 31? I don't even know how old I am. So I feel for some of these older guys that are out there doing it every day. So I agree with your point. You have anything else?
One of the other things, though,
go ahead.
While I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering how many people, like, even though the numbers aren't there at the ballpark, how much money are the Pirates really losing by people not showing up? Like, is it one of those where they're season ticket holders who aren't showing up, but they still have bought their tickets? So realistically, those numbers are probably going to be inflated a little bit more. I wonder if that's going to be a case with Pittsburgh, because if they make that push and they get into the playoffs, how differently is the stadium and the atmosphere going to be with a playoff team as opposed to April, May, early June where the games really don't mean as much.
Oh, I'll 100% go with that point. It's tough to tell, and we'll never know. And for the casual fans out there, I'll try to explain this so that you're aware. Well, what Matt's saying is every stadium and every team, they have corporate deals in place. So they'll go to different corporations in their area. You might see this done with like your high school team where they put up signs like of sponsorships. Well, in major sports, what they do is they sell blocks of tickets. So the easiest way to explain this is kind of using the Carolina Hurricanes down here. There's 2 levels to the stadium. It's a round circle, just like any other hockey stadium. The lower level is pretty much all corporate seats. So if you watch on TV, you'll see that it's generally pretty empty because not a lot of corporate people are going to go whenever you aren't winning. Just face the facts. So I don't know what part of the stadium. It's easier to see for like a hockey or another sport, the part of the stadium that's corporate seats. I would guess for the Pirates, most of them in the lower level, at least behind home plate, maybe down the lines. I know some of the upper deck ones, but each section, some sections are fan sections. A lot of the tailgate sections you see at Major League ballparks are sponsored by companies. And if you work for the company, they might give them to different employees. I know I've sat in box seats given to me by companies I did business with or whatever.
Hey, cuz, give me 1 sec. I gotta lock up here. I'll be right back.
All right, cuz. All right, so Matt's going to step out, and I'll keep going with his point. And as soon as he gets back on, we'll fire that back up. But looking at the actual stadium, the stadium seats, if you're looking at where are you going to go and buy tickets, a lot of the corporate eats up the best seats in the house. That's just how it works. So if you go to a scalper and the scalper's offering tickets to the games, they might already have bought the tickets from either another donor or the team gave them back. Sometimes they're flex seating where a certain business can buy a package. Let's say you and 3 other businesses buy like a quarterly deal where you can get 3 or 4 tickets a week throughout the whole season in that same section with them. So sometimes you can get 12 tickets out of the 20. Sometimes you only take 4 or 5, whatever. And if you're not going to use them, no one's going to show up. So normally the company will say, hey, Pirates, see if you can sell them back up. And then they will open them up. So there's times where I've gone, and actually the last Pirates game I've been to, I went out, stood in line with a buddy of mine, and we were all hanging out there. And this guy came up. He said, hey, our group has 2 extra tickets if you guys want them. And we're there behind home seats. So we said, yeah, we'll take them. We were standing in line for the ticket office early. It was one of the early games in the year. And they were like, yeah, we're not going to use them. So take the tickets. And we sat in corporate. And it was pretty sweet. It was down first row. I'll post a picture on Twitter and Facebook and stuff of our seats. But we were down pretty good. And those are corporate seats. So if we wouldn't have been there at that time, that group, I don't even know what where they worked or what they were doing. If I wouldn't have been there, standing randomly, waiting for the ticket booth to open, those tickets would have gone to waste. I doubt that guy, maybe he would have waited out there to try to find someone else to give the tickets to or whatever, but he would have just went in. Now what happens to the cost? Since we didn't pay for them, I would assume that business probably got a discounted rate. And will that hurt the Pirates' bottom line? Overall, I don't know. I don't think the corporate tickets are already paid for, so I don't think it hurts them that much. So they make up another decent bit based on regular ticket sales. And even if you're not corporate, you can buy ticket packages. Rick, he's always on here. He's had them in the past. I don't know if he has them this year. But Matt's calling back, so we'll get him back on here. I'm just wrapping up the ticket thing, Matt. I do know that Rick had regular season tickets. So even if you're not a business, you can buy small packages. I forget how many games he actually had, maybe 12, 20. And you pick which games you want to go to. And then your seat's reserved. For the rest of the week, those are usually box office tickets or whatever. Or the Pirates will have their own scalpers. They'll say scalpers are illegal, but most of them are run by the team themselves. If you go up and ask them, and you say, hey, are you affiliated? They'll say, yeah. And a lot of them have a little card, I believe. At least I've seen a guy for the Indians. He had a little badge that said that he worked for the stadium underneath his coat, because they don't want you to know that they're just selling basically box office tickets. And they can, that way there's no big line at the box office tickets if you can get them from 5 dudes spread out across the parking deck. It's just easier that way. But I'll see. I'll try to dig out and see. Maybe there have been studies in the past to dig into that part. How much revenue actually comes from corporate seats or pre-sold tickets compared to how many people are there. So the Pirates already know how much revenue they're getting if people aren't showing up at all. And I would imagine they do their budgets based on that. And then they do their budgets based on a best case scenario. And I'm sure they'll lie and say, well, people weren't in the seats. We lost a ton of money. I don't know if they actually lost money, because if you're a smart businessman, you're not going to run the team if the corporate costs don't at least cover your bases to run the stadium in the black. So, I don't know. That's where we'll end that. We're going to get into the NFL here, Matt.
All right. Sounds good.
First big topic, NFL rule changes for the summer. I brought this up because I saw a couple different things. Actually, before I even get into this, I saw another article. I was going to bring it in the high tempo. I might have skipped that. I saw a think piece by the New York Times, which annoyed me today, because it's titled "The Football Hit Felt All Over Japan." And I have it up. I'll share it as soon as this show's over. And some guy wrote this article basically saying that in Japan they have a football league, American Football League, which I didn't even know was a thing. And they were saying that the rules of American football do not go well with Japanese culture. And I was thinking, what the hell is this guy talking about? The hit behind the article was a quarterback rolled out to the right, throws a pass. I think it was a throw pass, or he might even hand it off. I can't remember. But he rolls out to the right. He's standing there as the play develops, and a linebacker comes down and chases him from behind and blindsides him, takes his knees out, and he gets hurt. I don't know what kind of injury it was. Where the coach and that player said that the coach had told him to do that, and he got hurt. And they were kind of blaming it on the sport of football and how it encourages violence, and how in Japan, if your honor is kind of hurt, that it doesn't really mesh well with the rules. And I was thinking, that doesn't make any sense. You follow the rules or just kick him out of the league. Like, it has nothing to do with culture. It's a game.
Okay.
It's a game. It's not your life. So I'm going to share that article. I wanted to bring it up. I had it as my high tempo, but I don't know. I probably skipped it. They said the linebacker has been suspended and the coach has resigned, and a lot of the other teams canceled their games against them. So, and it might have even been a college game over there. I think it was. Where, yeah, it's two of Japan's best-known college football programs, and they share 50 national titles between them. But to me, it just doesn't make sense. Why blame the sport, or why blame the culture, if it's one player and one coach? In the United States, they never would have wrote that piece. They would have crucified the coach, and that player would have been blackballed from the entire league. So, that's what we're looking at. Speaking of cultural things, the big headline today for the NFL rule changes are they want to give a 15-yard penalty for people kneeling at the national anthem. And to me, we basically didn't talk about this last year because I hate the politics thing in sports, and I hate even the think piece that New York Times did on Japanese football. That's not football. If you want to do a piece on culture, put it in the culture section. Like, you can't have both. Pick and choose. If I'm going to sports, I want to see sports. I don't want to see a culture piece. So you're going here and you're looking at the politics thing, and they're going to add a 15-yard penalty this year. Matt, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's the NFL trying to cover themselves, and if you're making it a penalty, they're basically forcing them to just basically have their own professional. If that's going to be what their standard's going to be, businesses have a right to set what their standards are going to be, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do.
Oh, I'll play devil's advocate here. This is pointless. This is a pre-kickoff penalty from what I've read, which is a meaningless penalty. If you remember, they already moved the kickoff up, I believe, and they moved the touchback up. So if you get a 15-yard penalty, and if you assess it before the kick, which they're not clear on, so there's basically two options. Either the team's going to start at the 40-yard line with the ball at the beginning of the game, or they're going to start at the 25 because they're going to assess it from the kickoff, which means the dudes will kick off from like the 40-yard line. And that they're definitely going to kick it out of the end zone. So it's kind of a meaningless penalty. Is it really going to matter on the opening drive if you start at the 40? Potentially, you might be able to get the game off on the right foot. But I don't think it's going to work. If you want to make a statement and you want guys to stop kneeling, make it... Actually, I thought about this before the show, Matt, but here's my proposal. What they should do is give each team a 15-yard penalty card that you can play at any time during the game for everyone that kneels. Five guys kneel. That coach gets 5. No, let's not do cards because that's very soccer-like. Do bags, like the challenge bags, and make them like big, heavy bags so that he can wear them on his side and make him wear a side holster. So 5 guys kneel, he gets 5 of these bags. And then anytime throughout the game, there's a big sack. He's like, shit, we needed that conversion. Let me throw one of my 15-yard penalty bags out in the field. So he throws out a 15-yard penalty bag, and then he can go ahead and he'll get a 15-yard penalty automatically from that spot to give them a first down. I think it would add more strategy to the game, and it would actually mean something. Because how many coaches would wait and hold that 15-yard penalty and never use it? Probably a good bit, so their fans can be equally mad at them. And how many players would actually kneel knowing that they could potentially lose the game on a penalty that they got for kneeling? Because let's say your team drives down to kick a game-winning kick, and the opposing coach has one 15-yard penalty to throw right whenever your team's going to kick the game-winning kick, pushing you out of field goal range. I think it would be hilarious, and I think that's what they should do. What do you think about that?
I think for a change, I think there's actually a little bit of logic to that. I wouldn't mind seeing something like that, because then there is a little bit of strategy involved. I mean, you're almost taking the same approach as some teams do with timeouts, and there's some people that they really believe in valuing timeouts and using those effectively, and there's coaches, like maybe Mike Tomlin, who struggled to effectively use them during reasonable times, or to use the challenges appropriately. So, I mean, it could add one more element to some of these, games or issues and things like that.
Yeah, my thing is, if you're going to give the penalty, make it mean something. Like what? Who cares if there's... What they're going to give you 10, 15-yard penalties at the same time? They are not. If 10 people kneel, that's probably going to end up being one 15-yard penalty. Waste of time. Why even call that penalty? 15 yards is nothing in the NFL. The opening drives are hard enough to get going that, okay, so they start with the field goal. You really think that if the Browns started with the field goal against the Steelers last year, that it would matter? I mean, their games were kind of close because it's a rivalry game. But, like, let's say, any of the garbage teams, you have, like, the Browns playing anyone. Is 3 points or a 15-yard penalty spot going to help them? No. And will players even care? Because you still have the media tearing them apart. So the media is going to be telling the guys to kneel still, because it's going to happen. And then you have the coaches, they're going to kind of stay. They don't want to be getting the heat from the media. It's only one 15-yard penalty. So it's not enough. Don't go halfway, NFL. Let the team use the 15-yard penalty anytime throughout the game and make it add up. Could you imagine if a whole team knelt and you had 50-yard penalties, 15-yard penalties? The fans would be livid if that happened. I don't think that many people are kneeling anymore, maybe only 2 or 3. So it's definitely doable. Unless both teams knelt, that would really put a show on the NFL. If both teams knelt, so both coaches ended up with like 50
but here's the other
15-yard penalty cards.
Richie, with this whole thing with the kneeling, if the media doesn't make a big deal about it, then nobody's going to care. It gained a lot of steam in the beginning part of last year because it was so new. But by the end of the year, it kind of ran its story, and you weren't really seeing as much information on who's kneeling and why are they kneeling and what's their cause and what's this. They eventually got away from it.
Yeah, because the ratings dropped.
The entire story.
Yeah, the ratings dropped because like I said, for the Japanese piece, I don't want to read about culture. I clicked on sports because I wanted to read on sports. I wanted to try to get some other opinions because I saw some early top 25 ranking stuff coming out. So I thought, I wonder if other people have put theirs out. So I try to bring up a lot of different, I just type in like sports section newspapers to try to see, do I find any? No. Instead, I find weird articles like that. And then I see the rule change. And the other big headline that comes across my feed, because of course I follow the Steelers, everyone's telling me that Ben Roethlisberger texted Mason Rudolph. Great. Just what I needed to know. I don't even care who texts me. Why do I care who texts Mason Rudolph? So you're looking at it and you're thinking, is this real life? And so this is another thing of that. If I turn on a game, I want the game to start. I want to watch the game. I don't want to watch 15 commercials, see some weird American Idol type pop star from some show sing the national anthem for 38 minutes because they're trying to do all kind of crazy runs with their voice or whatever. I just want to watch the game. Even NHL, like it was too long to start some of the games. They announced it starts at 5 so they can feed you 15 minutes of commercials before the puck dropped. Like, just tell me when the puck drops. At least with college basketball, they started to actually put the tip time. And the tip time's usually been pretty spot on. So that I know if Michigan tips at like 9:47, that's when I need to turn the TV on. I don't need to turn it on at 9:30. Because it's just going to be ads and people talking about other random stuff like the kneeling that isn't anything to do with my team. If I'm invested in the game, I'm going to be excited, nervous to watch a game, amped up with some adrenaline. I don't need some guy trying to give me a think piece before I watch the game. Just my thoughts. So, let me see what else we got here. Rule changes. I know Madden had talked about this, and I might have brought this in earlier. They had talked about adjusting the pass interference penalty. I don't know if I saw too much back on that because it's hard to find out what comes through the rules changes whenever everybody just talks about the kneeling thing. So I don't know what else is coming about it. They did talk about changing the 2-point conversion again. And I don't know if that's going to be a thing that happens or not, where if after like a certain point in overtime, you might have to go for 2. Or like right away, you might have to just go for 2 in overtime or something like that, which I think would be a good idea. I think I saw that come up somewhere, so I hope I wasn't wrong on that report. But I think that would be something cool that they would do. The college football kind of already does that, and with the college football kickoffs, it's really not that big of a deal. So, Matt, what changes as a coach? What would you like to see change in the NFL?
From the NFL side, well, I mean, as a whole, I think the rules that they have are good. They just need to clean up the stuff that we've complained about through the course of the year. You know, the things like defining the catch. Yeah. I think that's, to just have it clear cut where if it's a bang bang play, it is what it is. Don't overthink it, because I think what's happening is now we're scrutinizing it to a point that we got to have 700 different camera angles and this and that. And, for as much as I've criticized baseball for this, I must think that certain aspects of football, like you're not going to be able to tell how a play is going to happen. So you almost have to just trust what was the call on the field. And all good, bad, and ugly, just accept that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I know they had talked about that as one of the proposals, but it looks like today at the meeting they mainly focused on kickoffs. So some of those other ones that were previously we brought on the docket, I brought up my old notes here. The other one would be use of the helmet, which I think they might have ruled on today. There's a late article here from like an hour ago from like the NFL So I'll try to see. Hopefully it doesn't throw an ad up. But they were looking at changing the kickoff rules, which they did. I think what the proposals were, as this loads, they wanted 5 guys on each side of the ball at least. So for an onside kick, so that you weren't able to. What teams had started to do on onside kicks was they would have a first wave of guys run down and just tackle the return team. And I think they were trying to get rid of that because they're trying to limit player injuries. So you have to have a balanced kickoff formation, even if it's an onside kick. I think that would go through. The helmet rule, looks like the NFL did update that. I'll read this. If a player lowers his helmet to establish linear body posture prior to initiating and making contact with the helmet, he's ejected. Basically, that's the Ryan Shazier, where your head's down, poor tackling form, and you get hit, which should have been in the rules 20 years ago. They knew that was bad for you.
I'm going to argue that one.
20 years ago, that should have been in the rule book. Go ahead. What's your argument?
No, because it's one more thing that you're going to have to try to figure out and distinguish between what's okay and what isn't okay, and it opens up a whole nother can of worms. And when you're looking at tackling is one of the most difficult things that you can teach a football player to do, because it goes against every common sense thing that your body tells you to avoid contact, to avoid injury, and you got to almost teach yourself how to properly tackle and break down and all the things that go with that. That it's such a bang thing that happens a lot of times, that when you get someone that's willing to make tackles like Shazier does and did, that's going to be really, really tough to patrol that and to get the heads out of some of those plays.
Well, here, I'll tell you, they can really fix that at the Youth Football League. If the NFL really push it across the United States, that youth football should not play with helmets. Come up with like some lighter form of pads and play in the backyard. When we used to play backyard football all the time, Matt, how many times did you put your head down and spear us? 0. You didn't have a helmet on. So you can't tell me that that's the only way they learn how to tackle. No, if you played young, you learn to keep your head up, because otherwise, when you're that young, you're not going to be able to see what the hell's going on. One kid would juke you, it'd look like a fool out there. So the only way in the NFL that happens is once you start to get bigger and you're able to read the plays and you're playing high school against guys that are undermatched. Yeah, you can start to spear them because you can make huge hits and get some fumbles and stuff like that. And I think that's really where the bad form comes in. I know high school will never get rid of the helmets, but start to teach them young proper tackling form, and I think that will resolve itself. The other things I have on here is player delivering, I think this one's dumb, player delivering a blow had an unobstructed path to his opponent. Like, what the hell does that even mean? He hit him when no one else was there? Like, he wasn't being blocked? And then the other one, contact was clearly avoidable. Player delivering the blow had other options.
So they're trying to take away the plays where, like, for example, if someone blitzes off the edge, and this is where I think the spearing becomes so difficult. You're coming hard off the edge, you're untouched, and you got a clear shot at the quarterback. A lot of times you're trying to just break the quarterback in half when you're hitting them. So players will put their head down, knowing that they're going all in for the big play, put their head down. That's where I think they're going to try to draw the line of, could he have avoided it? Could he have, like, not hit him, like, in the knee, or gone low or gone too high and hit him in the head? They want to find that middle area where you can try to make it safe. But I think by doing that, it's such a fine line. You can't hit them low. You can't take their knees out. You can't hit them in the head. So it's, you're giving the defenders a very limited target area, and for the offensive players, it's basically game on.
Well, yeah, if you're going through, and I understand your point for the defensive guy, but even if you just keep your head up a little bit, I think as the league gets more mobile quarterbacks, I think you'll see a lot less spearing of the quarterback. I think what was happening was, you're right, you have these big, giant Ben Roethlisberger-sized guys standing back there making throws as a statue. And if you put your head down, you're able to get a good shot on him after he releases the ball. Might not be protected, might hurt his ribs a little bit. And the next time he goes to make that throw, he's going to be thinking about it. As you get guys that are running, you put your head down on Lamar Jackson, you're not going to spear him. Now, after a time, a lot of these guys like RG3, how did he get hurt? He was getting hurt running out of the play, getting hit in the knees. He wasn't getting hit by spears. Even Cam Newton hasn't really been speared because he has a little bit of that mobility. And to be honest, back to my Ben Roethlisberger point, he has that mobility too, where you really don't see it happen. I think you've seen it with older quarterbacks, and I think that will go away whether they enforce new rules or not. And just for the record, I'm against having way more penalties than needed. You don't need this many rules. Let the guys play. This is just going to slow down the game even more. And once you get under the hood to try to see if the helmet's down, it's already going to be, let's go get a few more beers. Maybe we'll not go back to our seats. Maybe we'll just go out in the parking lot and tailgate after 13 reviews late in the game. I know that's what's going to happen. So, let me see. The main ones that they had for the kickoff, I said about the 5 guys on each side. When the ball hits the end zone, it's a touchback. Normally, I think that was in college, that was a rule. In the NFL, this guy still had to touch it and down it, or it had to go out of bounds. What's the other one? The wedge block was eliminated. So what that means is, Matt, you'll know. You want to explain the wedge block to them? It's actually whenever you're between the 40 and 45-yard line, you can't put up a double team. The wedge block was the team would make a V shape, and if you played Madden, you saw that was like one of the options before, where those guys would then run up and try to make a wedge. They would cut through the kicking return. They want people blocking one-on-one so that you don't get clipped by a wedge out of the corner of your eye.
Yep.
So that's the main one for those. Players cannot line up more than 1 yard from the point of the kickoff. So before they were able to run back, like they started the 5 yards back and they were able to run with the kicker up to the ball. Now they don't do that anymore. They have to wait till he kicks it, and then there's kind of like a snap, which they wanted to get rid of kickoffs. That's kind of dumb because now as your returner, you're going to have more lane to get up and run it out. And I think that's really the last one. Just some other ones about making a block. Once you have to wait till the ball is touched before you can cross the restraining line, the 45-yard line, to initiate a block. So if you're the receiving team, you have to wait back in formation, but you can't do a wedge block. So I don't know what they're going to do for kick returns. It doesn't really make sense. They're trying to get guys one-on-one, it seems like, to protect guys, but too many rules. Too many rules. Matt, you have any other thoughts on the new rules?
Well, I know with the wedge, one of the issues that people had was similar to the onside kick. You would have what's known as wedge busters, and they were like basically your linebacker, your faster offensive lineman that you would put right in the middle, and their sole job was just to run down and just crush that wedge and create cracks so that the running backs couldn't just follow that V of people right up the middle.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it looks like you're not able to touch people. I don't know how that's going to work on onside kicks and things. I guess everyone would have to just go for the ball. I feel like that's going to make it a lot harder to recover an onside kick, because if either side can't initiate contact before the 45 and the touch line is the 45, you're just going to have to sit back and wait for that ball to bounce. Might make for some more exciting plays, I guess. I don't know. I think part of it though is they're going to set, like, by doing it that way and having balanced formations, it'll make things a little bit easier to potentially try to do something tricky where you're having even number of people. So what side are you kicking it towards? I'll tell you what I would try to do is have the guy kick straight under the ball so that it pops up really high in the air, like 15 yards down. Because if they can't block you until you hit the 45, like they can't run up and stop you, you'll have full momentum to try to run through and catch the ball. As long as you're not trying to block them, you're trying to actively catch the ball. I think that's where you could see a lot of guys, and I'm pretty sure some kickers could easily pop it up. I don't think it would have to even hit the ground. The receiving team can catch it. Five guys on the side.
I think the only issue you would have with that is for teams that would try to fair catch it.
Oh, that's true.
Fair catch interference.
True, yes. That is the rule. So that's why the guys normally do kick it off the ground. But I'm thinking you can still do the straight down pop-up. It would just be a little bit harder to control. I'm sure you could catch some noob off, like, because a lot of rookies play kickoff team. I'm sure if early in the year, maybe not so much in the playoffs, it'd be funny if it happened in the playoffs. If you did do that, a lot of players probably wouldn't call fair catch. Because most likely if you try to do it to catch them off guard, now the receiving team doesn't know what you're going to do because your lineup's going to be the exact same. I mean, 5 guys on the side, what's the difference now? You're better off just lining up like you're going to do an onside kick every play. That's what I would do anyway. You have anything else you want to talk about on the NFL rule changes stuff?
No, I think we pretty much hit it all. Just to give you a heads up, I'm heading through a spot where I might lose you. If I do, I'll get back as soon as I get cell service again.
All right, sounds good. We're going to head up college football, early top 25. I want to say I picked on James Franklin a couple weeks ago about his recruiting class. Penn State was down in the teens after last year's great class, and I said that he hasn't been recruiting Pennsylvania because they don't have a great upcoming class. Well, he landed a 4-star and a 5-star this week, I think from Virginia. I could be wrong. I didn't read the whole article. That's what happens whenever you just browse it real quick. You forget. But he did get a 4 and 5-star, and it did bring it up into the teens. I think they're number 14 now. I do have the stats once it loads. Penn State is now 14th in the recruiting rankings. They are one of only, how many teams? 1, 2, 3, 6, 9. Are they the 10th team? 10 teams have 5-star guys on their roster. So once he fills his class up, you're most likely looking at a top 10 recruiting class because right now they have Oregon ahead of them, which they really shouldn't be ahead. Oregon just has more guys. And Miami's in the same boat. No top-end talent for Miami. So Penn State should jump at least both of those, finish in the top 12 or maybe the top 10 if they're able to fill out their class. And I don't know what their scholarship limit is. But looking at that, still behind Ohio State and Michigan, who both have 5-star guys committed. It's going to be hard to make up that ground, but it is going to make for an exciting division whenever you have 3 teams in the same division recruiting at that level. The other recruiting side of that is the SEC West, which is looking the same with A&M in the top 5, and you have Alabama, of course, and you have Ole Miss and LSU, and I don't know how Ole Miss is hanging around. There is no way that Ole Miss should be hanging around this high in the rankings. They're looking at sanctions. A bunch of their guys already transferred, and they're still pulling a class like this. But on the other side of the things, I did send out to the guys. Athlon Sports put out their early top 25 for the season, and it's way too early, but they did have a lot of good points because of some of the roster stuff that they've had. It's not all 100% finalized, but they were able to get some of the roster deals with player eligibility. I think there's a couple other guys that are still moving rosters, so it's not actively set. I would say hold off on this until maybe July. But some of the key takeaways just from the podcast here, they had, what did I say? Michigan was 4th, or Michigan was 5th. Ohio State was 4th. Ohio State 4, Michigan 5, Penn State 11, and Michigan State, I think Michigan State was 12. Let me see. So I think they had, and was Wisconsin up there. So the Big Ten had a ton of top teams this year once again. The Michigan ranking is due to Shea Patterson being ruled eligible for them. They start off the year at number 15, Notre Dame, so that'll be a good test to see how Shea is. Michigan State is 12th, Penn State 11th, and Wisconsin's actually 9th. I thought they were 10th. They're 9th, so 5 top 12 teams for the Big Ten. It's going to be a crazy year, once again, how it has been lining up with Harbaugh and Franklin and Urban Meyer, along with D'Antonio and Michigan State, and then Wisconsin in the West. The key team will be in the West with Nebraska, not currently ranked, just because it's too early into his tenure. But Scott Frost, we're going to have to wait and see what happens with his recruiting class. And then the other notable, Miami, they had it number 6 from the ACC side. Of course, Pitt's not ranked. West Virginia, not ACC related, but I did have a note on them. I'll get to them in a second. Miami 6th, and Matt's Florida State 13. What do you think of that ranking, Matt, with Willie Taggart coming in?
Well, I would like to see him ranked higher, but I think that's part of my homerism. I think that's fair for him, considering how bad they flamed out last year. There's questions at quarterback. There's questions with the system, how it's going to mesh with the players. Time will tell if it's truly worth it. I think it's paper champions right now. You look, when you have that many Big Ten teams that high, there's no way that they end the season on that note. I think that the potential's there, but like we've talked in previous years, they almost beat each other up to a point where they end up knocking each other out of high bowls and different things because one beats the other and then the other beats someone else. So I'm curious to see how all that plays out, but I would have a hard time imagining a scenario where you have that many teams outside of the SEC in the top 10.
Well, the SEC and the Big Ten, it really came full circle when the Big Ten added those 2 extra teams in Rutgers and Maryland. Now they're able to have those top teams, the same thing the SEC was doing. All your big teams are in the one division. Like you said, they round robin it. It already happened in 2016. You can say last year Michigan flamed out and ruined it a bit. I think Michigan State also dropped. They were 3-9 one year. Was that 2017? So Michigan State flaming out ruined it 2017, and Michigan ruined it last year to keep it going. But you're looking at perennial, those 5 teams, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, and Wisconsin, really pushing the double-digit wins almost every year, it seems like the past 3 years. So you at least had 4 of those teams that were close to being top 10 teams, which is ridiculous. And I don't know if it's going to keep up. Could it get worse with Scott Frost? Why not? Look at the SEC whenever they had Florida and Georgia, or for a while there, Florida, Georgia, and a combination of South Carolina. You have 2 strong teams in one division, and then the other division's eating itself up. They might not be in the top 12, but they might be in the top 15 or so. And that's what you're going to look at. Who loses to who? The big thing that one year, I think when they did have 4 teams, was Penn State lost to Pitt that year. If they don't lose to Pitt, the Big Ten perennial could have had 2 teams in the playoff before the SEC did. And that's what it's looking like that could happen. Can Michigan beat Notre Dame in their non-conference? I don't even know who Ohio State plays, but you got one big non-conference game. If you win that game, you're going to go ahead and bump up over the other conferences. That's what's going to happen. And the ACC, their highest team is Clemson. I didn't mention them, so they're up kind of in the same division with Florida State, but it's a 2-team race. They really don't have competition for Miami. Maybe that's why they ranked them so high. The next team they had is 16, Virginia Tech. And I mentioned I'd get to West Virginia. West Virginia, they have at 22. I want to say that Will Grier has one of the best odds to win the Heisman. If Will Grier wins the Heisman, they'll win the Big 12. They're going to finish higher than 22. Even if it comes down to West Virginia and Oklahoma, it doesn't matter. They're not going to be ranked 22. West Virginia could be a top 10 team, at least top 15. Dana Holgorsen, he hasn't had a consistent run. He's due. or the fans are going to start to get very, very upset there. The way they started the year last year with Virginia Tech, I thought they could have put them away. They kind of flamed out, had a strong run in the Big 12, but just couldn't capitalize. Now is the year to capitalize. You got your quarterback on a transfer situation. He's had a year in the system. Let him go wild. That's basically it from my standpoint. Matt, you got anything else to add for college football?
Well, I think one of the things that you're looking at with the Coastal side is Florida State, Virginia Tech play their first game Labor Day weekend. That'll be a sign to see, is Virginia Tech going to become more of a competitive team with Justin Fuente, or are they just going to continue just to be mediocre? And on the Coastal side, I think there's a very distinct possibility that Pitt could potentially be a team that could give Miami fits. They upset Clemson 2 years ago. They upset Miami this past year. They're a wild card team. They had the freshman quarterbacks had all off season to work and be with the program and be in the weight room. So if they get some consistent quarterback play, there's a good chance that Pitt could be a dark horse in the Coastal.
Well, you're cutting out there, and I will say, I'll add in, that's another big key for Penn State. They lost at Pitt last time. They have to go into Pitt. We talked last week. It's going to be a night game, prime time, possibly game day, going in, and that's a tough place to play. I know Penn State brags about their fans are the only ones that buy tickets there at Pitt, but win there. If Pitt and Penn State split the series and it's not renewed into a yearly series, there's no way Penn State can say it's because Pitt can't compete. You can't get the series tied. Penn State has to beat them this year. You can't just win at home. Got to win on the road. I looked it up real quick. Ohio State has games against Oregon State, which shouldn't be a challenge, let's be honest. And TCU, possibly a challenge, but most likely not. So that either way, TCU is going to have, and I think actually it might be at TCU, so maybe it would be more of a challenge than I thought. But Ohio State usually has their way with the Big 12 teams, last year being an exception, just due to their style of play. They're bigger, they have faster athletes, and if they get that game, it's going to make the Big 12 look down, and I think a lot of people are looking at that. Penn State, on the other hand, they really only have Pitt on their schedule, I believe. So I'll bring theirs up real quick. But when you're looking at it overall, they have App State, Pittsburgh, and Kent State. The Pitt game's huge for both the ACC and the Big Ten because that's what happened last time. Pitt beat Penn State and Clemson won the national championship. Can Penn State play, or can Pitt play spoiler again? I don't know. Their crossover games, they really, really luck out. Pitt doesn't play Florida State. Pitt doesn't play Clemson. Pitt doesn't play NC State. Pitt's crossover games are Syracuse. I think Syracuse is a crossover game. Who else is even in that other division? Wake Forest, UNC. UNC's not in that other division. So their ACC schedule is very weak. Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, Duke, Virginia Tech, Virginia, Miami, and Wake Forest. I mean, Pitt could easily run that schedule. And just looking at this objectively, if they get back to where they were 2 years ago, and like Matt said, they get competent quarterback play, Pitt could be looking at a double-digit win season, which, I mean, would be crazy in itself. Now, if they get into a championship game against Clemson, would they be able to match up? That's where you might see the disparity. But that end-of-season game, I think Pitt has Miami at home. Or no, it looks like they might be at Miami. Yeah, it is at Miami this year. So if Pitt goes to Miami for the final game of the season, and if it's for the ACC Coastal, that could be a huge game. Huge game. So that's all I have for college football. We're definitely going to be focusing on football this year. Matt, got anything else to add?
No, I just can't wait for it to be back. It's a great time of year, and looking forward to seeing some good matchups on the tube again.
I was disappointed that the NFL did their little preseason game and it really wasn't televised. Did you get to watch any of the clips from that or anything? Wasn't it closed?
It was, yeah. I mean, it seemed like it was an NFL staging a tryout for Johnny Manziel is what it appeared to be. Like, the only highlights were what did Johnny Manziel do in comeback games. And the only thing with that was that he ended up signing his 2-year contract in Canada, which, going back to the whole Colin Kaepernick issue, Manziel he tried to get a contract. It didn't work. He went to Canada. You don't see Kaepernick attempting to try to play somewhere to get the experience to come back and play.
And players have went up to Canada and played. I think Seneca Wallace was the backup for Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. Maybe he was there before Russell Wilson got there, but I'm pretty sure he played in Canada for a while. He was a stay-out quarterback from Iowa State. And, I mean, it's worked out for guys. You might not be a stud guy, but if you want to get back in the league, work on your game. It's nothing that you can't pass up. So
Doug Flutie did it. Warren Moon did it. There's been a lot of guys who have a proven record of going to Canada and playing well and earning their way back into the NFL. But it's, do you want to play or do you want to be a political activist? And he still hasn't seemed to have made his mind up yet on what he wants to do.
Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. I was just hoping that whenever they did that, it wasn't going to be a publicity stunt. And we could actually see a little bit of football to go with the spring football games, but nothing really happened with it. So I'm excited. Good to see some 7-on-7 soon. That kind of summer ball stuff is going to be lighting up, and we'll be keeping you updated. So join us next week, Tuesday at 9 p.m. Streaming was a little bit behind this week. I said I've been trying to get some video fixes and things. So if the video has been freezing, I guess it's not so much the audio, like I said at the beginning of the show. If the video and stuff's freezing, I'm working on it. I don't know if it's on like my encoding stuff with Facebook's end or something else, but I'm trying to get it. And what you might see are some extra test videos this weekend. So I might do some little light coverage type things. I have been keeping an eye on Boston Celtics 2-2 with the Cavs. It's turning out to be a great series, so I might do some test streamings, post games for that or something. So keep your eye out. Follow us, S-Bound Sports on Twitter, Southbound Sports on Instagram and Facebook, and we will see you next week.